In an industry where a comeback is often measured by rankings and records, BTS have chosen to take a radically different path, replacing exclamation marks with question marks. BTS, The Return is not merely a continuation of a global comeback narrative, but a rare dissection of the most vulnerable state of a group that has spent years at the very top. Just days after release, Swim and Body to Body swiftly dominated Spotify Global, a familiar scenario to the point of losing its dramatic edge. Yet that very familiarity exposes a paradox. When achievements become the default, what the public craves is no longer what BTS have accomplished, but how BTS have changed. The answer is not found on stage. It lies in the opening frames of BTS, The Return, where Jin appears not in brilliance, but in exhaustion, slightly out of sync after a long flight to Los Angeles. This is no incidental detail. It is an aesthetic statement. BTS will no longer be portrayed as flawless icons, but as individuals struggling to keep pace with their own shadows. This sense of misalignment is deeply symbolic. It dismantles the image of perfect synchronization that once defined BTS, revealing an unspoken truth. Behind a seamlessly functioning collective are individuals constantly adjusting, even sacrificing, to avoid falling behind. Jin's absence from the songwriting credits of several early tracks is therefore no longer a gap, but a narrative about limits, pressure, and the cost of sustaining existence within a global success machine. Los Angeles, as depicted in BTS, The Return, is stripped of its familiar dreamlike veneer. No longer a creative paradise, it emerges as a closed-loop production system, 6-day workweeks in the studio, intense debates over English lyrics, layers of sound meticulously dismantled and rebuilt under time pressure. The use of grainy, unstable VHS-style visuals is not merely stylistic, it actively pulls BTS down from the pedestal of stardom, placing them in an environment where success is forged through repetition and discipline to the point of exhaustion. Yet within this industrial atmosphere, ordinary moments become the emotional anchors, shared meals over grilled meat, glasses of soju, fleeting expressions of homesickness. These details soften the film's structure while dissolving the boundary between global superstars and ordinary young people, a subtle storytelling strategy that allows audiences not only to observe BTS, but to see themselves reflected in them. One of the film's most significant layers lies in what is barely spoken, the post-military experience. In an industry that rarely explores this phase in depth, BTS, The Return allows it to permeate through small interactions, in their communication style, their discipline, and their shared rhythm. The scene of RM replaying a military wake-up tune on the saxophone is not just nostalgic, it is metaphorical. Experiences once considered peripheral now emerge as defining elements of their creative identity. This transformation likely informs one of their boldest decisions, choosing Swim, a slow, introspective track, as the lead single. In a market driven by tempo and spectacle, this choice feels almost like an intentional deceleration, a refusal to be carried forward by the inertia of past success. If Swim represents introspection, then Body to Body becomes a battlefield of ideas. The debate over incorporating the traditional Korean folk element errang into the track exposes a central tension: how to preserve cultural identity within a global product. The friction between the members and the producer is not merely creative conflict, it signals a shift. BTS are no longer just idols operating within a system, they are becoming active authors of their own music. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of BTS, The Return, is not the creative process, but the psychological state of those who have won everything. The more successful BTS become, the more they question themselves. From vocals to composition to language, every element is placed under a microscope, not only by the public, but by the members themselves. This is the most dangerous form of pressure. When external standards are no longer sufficient, one begins constructing harsher internal ones. Director Bong Joon, with his observational storytelling approach, does not attempt to resolve this paradox. Instead, he preserves it as an open-ended question. Allowing the members to film themselves with handheld mini cameras is not just a technical choice, but a narrative strategy. BTS are not being depicted, they are defining themselves. In the end, what lingers is not the image of sold-out stadiums or billions of streams, but 7 individuals living together in Los Angeles for 2 months, working like trainees, starting over from scratch. The contrast between their global stature and their beginner's mindset becomes the central axis of the film. BTS, The Return, does not attempt to prove how great BTS are. It asks a far more difficult question: when you have already reached every peak, who can you still become? And perhaps, in an era obsessed with answers, it is precisely these questions that make BTS worth waiting for.